The Silent Exodus: How Sri Lankan Muslims Were Massacred and Expelled by the LTTE. This is AR Telecast News 24/7. Tonight, we uncover a dark and often hidden chapter of South Asian history, a tragedy that left entire communities shattered, families scattered, and wounds that have still not healed. It is the story of how thousands of innocent Muslims who lived for centuries in Sri Lanka's north and east were brutally massacred and then driven from their homes by the LTTE. A story too often forgotten, a story that must be told. A land once shared in peace, long before war scarred the island, Sri Lanka's north and east were lands of shared lives. In towns like Jaffna, Mannar, Kilinochchi, Badakalawa, Akaripattu, Eravur, Kalmunai, and Kinya, Tamil-speaking Muslims lived side by side with Tamils and Sinhalese. They ran bustling markets. Their children played together on dusty roads. Mosques stood next to covials and churches. The call to prayer rose alongside temple bells. It was an intricate fabric of trust, trade, and neighborly ties. But as the LTTE rose in power in the 1980s, this harmony began to unravel. The LTTE's rise and a dark, new vision. The LTTE, claiming to fight for Tamil rights, sought a separate homeland, Tamil Eelam. But their vision was narrow. It was for Tamils alone. Though Muslims spoke Tamil, they were seen by the LTTE as outsiders, economic rivals, suspected informants, and above all, an obstacle to building a mono-ethnic Tamil state. Suspicion turned into resentment, resentment into hatred, and hatred into a chilling strategy of terror. Katankudi, a night soaked in blood. Then came August 3, 1990, a night forever etched in horror. In the eastern town of Katankudi, hundreds of Muslims gathered in two mosques for evening prayers. Without warning, about 30 LTTE gunmen stormed in. They opened fire on worshippers bowed in prayer. Bullets tore through fathers, sons, grandfathers, even small children. When the shooting stopped, over 140 Muslims lay dead. The floors were slick with blood. Survivors spoke of screams echoing against the walls, of bodies piled upon bodies. It was one of the worst massacres of civilians in Sri Lanka's modern history. Yet it faded quickly from the world's headlines. Akaripattu, Eravur, Kalmunai. The terror spreads. Katankudi was not alone. Around the same time, the LTTE unleashed terror in Akaripattu, Eravur, and Kalmunai. They ambushed Muslims on village roads, raided homes at night, dragged men outside, shot them in cold blood. Fear swept through Muslim communities like wildfire. People began to flee, clutching crying children and whatever belongings they could carry. October 1990, the Great Expulsion. Then came October 1990. The LTTE issued a chilling ultimatum. All Muslims living in the northern province must leave within 24 to 48 hours or face the consequences. Almost 75,000 Muslims were forced to abandon homes their families had lived in for generations. They left on foot, by bullock cart, by overcrowded trucks. At LTTE checkpoints, militants stripped them of cash, jewelry, even wedding bangles. They were allowed to carry little more than the clothes on their backs. Muslim houses were seized, shops looted, mosques vandalized. Lands disappeared under new ownership or simply under silence. Life in exile, 3 decades in limbo. Most of these expelled Muslims ended up in makeshift refugee camps in Puttalam, hundreds of kilometers away. What was meant to be temporary stretched into 3 long decades. Children grew up in tents, never seeing the mango trees or seashores their parents spoke of. They played in dusty lanes, studied under leaking roofs, married young to escape poverty. Even after the war ended in 2009, many found their ancestral lands occupied or tied up in endless legal battles. Why did it happen? The LTTE claimed to fight for minority rights, but in reality, they wanted a homeland for Tamils alone. Muslims, though Tamil-speaking, did not fit this vision. So the LTTE chose violence, massacre, and finally, mass expulsion. It was nothing less than ethnic cleansing. The wounds remain today, Simple memorials stand in Katankudi and Iravur, where survivors gather to recite prayers for those lost. In Akarai Patu and Manar, old men still whisper stories of how neighbors disappeared, of nights spent hiding in fear. And in the refugee settlements of Puttalam, elders still dream of returning home, to lands that may now exist only in memory. This is AR Telecast News, 24/7. We bring you these untold stories not to reopen old wounds, but to honor truth, and to remind the world of suffering that must never be forgotten. Stay with us for more in-depth reports and human stories from across the globe.